Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the aftermath of the LA wildfire.
Oh, those were just devastating.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a whole collection of firsthand accounts from people who survived them, all different kinds of people
Right?
all dealing with this just massive loss and the huge task of rebuilding.
Yeah, that rebuilding process, it's not just about the physical stuff though, is it?
No, it's not. And I think that's what we're going to find as we look through these stories. It's that, you've got the physical rebuilding, but the emotional and social impact is just as massive.
Absolutely. Can linger a lot longer too.
Oh, for sure. And we're really going to get to meet these people, hear their stories. It's not just about statistics.
Right.
These are real people whose lives were just totally upended. But I think what's so fascinating is that we're going to see how people found resilience even in the ashes.
Absolutely. Talk about the strength of the human spirit, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting how that resilience can show up in so many different ways.
Right.
Like, you've got Kenya Johnson, for example, who, she was already struggling before the fire. You can only imagine, right?
Yeah.
Losing everything.
Yeah, it's just, I can't even fathom it. She was seen walking barefoot along the Pacific Coast Highway, just carrying a Bible and like a dress and a jacket and a sleeping bag.
Wow.
Everything else gone.
And still, she just had this unshakable faith. She said, the fire took what little I had, she said, but I don't cling to worldly possessions anymore. God provides everything I need. Really makes you think, about our own attachment to stuff.
It does. It makes you really rethink your priorities. And it's such a powerful contrast to someone like Peter Lenkoff, right?
Right, yeah.
This very successful TV producer lost his Malibu dream house. Now, obviously, any loss is a terrible thing, but it does raise this question. Does losing a home full of very expensive, fancy things feel different than losing what little you have?
It's a good question, isn't it? Because, yeah, loss does affect everyone, but Lenkoff's story really shows how the stuff we attach emotional value to, it goes way beyond what it's actually worth, in terms of money.
Yeah, for sure.
He lost like a vintage motorbike and this rare surfboard from the 1800s. I mean, things you just can't replace. And he said, when you lose those things, it doesn't matter how much money you have. Loss is loss.
Loss is loss. Absolutely. It doesn't discriminate, does it? That feeling of losing a place, it just cuts deep, no matter how big your house was or how fancy it was.
Exactly. And I think it makes us really question what's truly important in life. Because in the face of that kind of loss, we all kind of reevaluate, don't we?
Right. Strip away all that extra stuff and get down to what matters. It's like the fire, in a way, kind of clears things out.
Well, that's a good way to look at it.
Speaking of clearing things out, let's shift to families now.
Yeah.
We've got the Nguyen family. They're in Pacific Palisades, lost their home. They'd been there for 19 years. Their son, Sean, was seen going through the ashes trying to find anything left from his childhood. Breaks your heart.
Yeah, it's really tough. And sadly, it's not uncommon for younger people, losing their home. It's more than just the building, right? It's all those memories. It's their sense of identity. It can be really traumatic.
Absolutely. And his father, Jack, talked about feeling less wealthy, not just financially, but emotionally. But he also said, you remember others are facing even worse. Perspective is all we have left.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like finding strength by focusing on others who have it harder.
Yeah, it's like this, coping mechanism almost.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Because by realizing that others might be going through something even worse, it can make you grateful for what you still have.
Right. Family, your health.
Exactly. And that can give you the strength to rebuild.
Huh.
But as we're seeing, rebuilding, it's so much more than just, bricks and mortar. It's putting your life back together, especially when your whole community is gone.
Right.
Like what happened to Jan Scruton. She lost her home in Pacific Palisades, had been there 40 years.
Oh my gosh.
And her story really shows us this other layer of loss. It's not just your house, it's all those people you know.
Yeah, that network.
Yeah, all those relationships.
And she said, I miss everything. My neighbors, the corner store, even my pharmacist. It was more than a home, it was a family. It makes you realize just how much we depend on those everyday connections.
It really does. And so bouncing back, it means rebuilding those connections too.
Yeah.
That sense of belonging. Just as much as rebuilding your house, maybe even more.
Yeah. So we've heard about losing possessions, losing memories, even losing your sense of place. But there's this other story that flips the script on who suffers the most in a disaster.
Okay.
Chris Edwards, a homeless man, lost his shelter in the fire. You'd think that would just be devastating for someone who has so little to begin with.
You would think, yeah.
But his perspective is so powerful.
Oh, how so?
Because he was more worried about the people in those big, expensive houses that burned than he was about his own situation. His empathy is just amazing. He said, they're human just like me. Whether you're in a mansion or a tent, fire doesn't discriminate. It's a reminder that life isn't about possessions, it's about experiences and survival. It really makes you think.
It does, because, here's this guy, Chris, who has next to nothing. And he's showing this incredible empathy. It shows you that empathy has nothing to do with your circumstances.
Yeah.
And he sees right to the heart of what matters.
Yeah.
That we're all vulnerable to loss and we all want to survive. And I think he's right. At the end of the day, we are all in this together.
We are. And maybe it's that shared vulnerability that truly connects us as human beings.
Maybe so.
It's a powerful thought, isn't it? That shared humanity in the face of disaster. And it makes you wonder, what is it that makes some people able to bounce back, to be so resilient, when others just really struggle?
Yeah, that's something that, researchers have been trying to figure out for a long time. There isn't just one simple answer, right?
Right.
Resilience, it's complicated. It's like a whole bunch of things, like what kind of person you are, the support you have, even luck plays a part.
Yeah, I guess so.
But one thing that keeps coming up is this idea of agency. Like believing that even when things are really awful, you still have some control over what happens to you.
So it's not about just accepting what happened, but kind of taking charge of how you respond to it.
Exactly. It's like this inner strength to say, okay, this terrible thing happened, but I'm not going to let it define me. I'm going to figure out how to move forward. And that's going to look different for everyone, of course.
Right, because for some people, rebuilding might mean literally recreating what they lost, brick for brick.
Right.
But for others, it might be about starting fresh, taking this chance to do things differently.
Yeah, and that's where having people around you, family, friends, your community makes such a difference.
Yeah, like we saw with Jan Scruton, how much she missed her community, right?
Right.
It wasn't just the house, it was those connections.
Exactly. Those connections are what make a place feel like home. And so rebuilding, having those shared experiences, that's just as important as the physical rebuilding.
Absolutely. It makes you think about how important community centers are, churches, even just local businesses.
Yeah, they all create those spaces where people can come together